Oh, yeah, sorry. If you think this looks ridiculous, remember I have to help you pay attention by looking different in videos. Like if I happen to have the same view in another video or the same clothes, you might think, oh, I heard this one before. So, yeah. Anyways, this is Lessons in Democracy. So, I mentioned Curious George Santos previously. This is from CBC New York.
We are only focused on removing George Santos and making sure we get a special election.
Santos
So this is what I wrote as a comment, by the way, and there's over 2,000 comments. Most politicians hide from their constituents when they present themselves with hard to answer questions, including in Canada. This should definitely not be allowed in nations that claim to be democratic. What I wanted to say, and I've proven many, many times myself that, politicians kind of close the curtains when they see me pass by, or they lock the door, they say you need an appointment, and they often don't look busy when I pass by, and then they say I'm very busy. So whatever it is, like the hard questions, because politicians are rarely proven to be public servants. They're mostly looking for the path of least resistance to fame and fortune. And again, they would tell me, well, no, it's not easy, it's hard. And I was actually having simulations in my head yesterday of, what if I go somewhere where like nobody's in politics and it'd be easy for me to get into politics as an independent? And then I decided to just study the culture a lot, but continue to be me, but low profile me, until people start realizing, hey, this guy's consistent. This guy's a real public servant. This guy is calling people on stuff. Like, for example, if I was an MP, I would pretty much call the Speaker of the House there on his inabilities to set boundaries and maintain boundaries with adult politicians. And I would say it in a very polite way without the person taking affront. But I mean, it would be factual, and it would be probably something that a lot of the other MPs that already disliked me at that point would say, hey, you should get rid of him. He shouldn't talk to you like that. And it's a devolved low human standard culture that would kind of fight back to stay like this, because it's the path of least resistance to actually mature to a state where, there can be debates using reason, there can be conversations that are fair and based on reality, is overwhelming a consideration for any people primate, the 99.96% of you, and most certainly including politicians. So it'd be an interesting scenario. Then there might be some people, they say, no, Martin should become the Speaker of the House, and he should, be the babysitter of us here, so that, we can make more progress. And again, the people that do that, I'd say thank you, but, if I was you and I realized what I could do, is I would be more creative about which role I could be in. And in these simulations, I'm having fun. I'm like, okay, what if after, like, it's my second 4 years I'm starting, and again, people have prepared attacks against me, which I easily, wave away using reason. And for example, let's say Pierre Poilievre is really going against me, which he would. And I would say, well, journalists are always asking me, hey, what about Pierre Poilievre saying this about you? And I would just say, oh, that person is of no consequence to me. And I'd say this for a long period of time. And that'd be a simple way to, and it's not like I would refuse a public debate with him and me, set in a very particular way that we would transparently put to the public. This is how we agreed a public debate to be. It will be a lot about our character as people, and not as much about swaying rednecks in our favor, which is his specialty. And there's a lot of rednecks, so it's a powerful force, but I wouldn't allow that, right? I don't want to be the king of the rednecks. He can be the king of the rednecks if he wants. But if, let's say, we were the last two in a race for a prime minister, I would say also, aside from Pierre Poilievre, is of no consequence because he's not saying anything that really lends to the problem solving that are required in the modernity of our Anthropocene, for example. That could be as simple an answer as let me know when Pierre Poilievre says something like he lives in today's world. And I would love to hear. And if he does, I might, if I were voted prime minister, I'd make him my special consultant in this thing that he may or may not have said that relates to him proving he's connected to reality of the Anthropocene, which of course affects Canada as well. Now, let's say people wanted me to become prime minister in my second mandate, let's say as an MP for my second 4 years, is I would say, I mean, I'll put my name in the race, but I'm not going to campaign or waste money or blah, blah, blah for swaying votes. I mean, if, let's say I win, I would tell the Canadian public, to journalists, I would say, let's say I win by a narrow margin, is I know we belong to a system where I'd be getting a heart attack and never making any progress because it's a system that defeats itself for progress, right? And many democratic nations, out of the paranoia of what they were born and wrote their rules of democracy in, is to kind of, they're so afraid somebody would get into power like Trump, and they wouldn't allow, in this democracy for somebody to have that strong of a voice in a democracy, except that he did. And it's taken still 2 years and he's still not in jail. So, you got to admit how incompetent you are in the concept of democracy, even when your paranoia makes you write in your rules of democracy that, we got to make sure this doesn't happen. And when it does, it's so hard for you to get together and vote that you apply these things so that these people go to jail and nobody has any ideas to ever try what Trump did again. I mean, look at Curious George Santos, aside from Donald Duck Trump, is like let's say he gets a diagnosis that he's a pathological liar. Like so many people who are also very dishonest in, our North American proto-societies, is they might forgive that person too much, when really, I mean, it should be jail, even for George Santos, for at least 20 years, in the position of high responsibility that he's in. Whether he has this diagnosis that he can't stop himself or not, and when he gets caught, like he's not really giving apologies that don't insult people's intelligence anyways, so like that you allow this as a culture, that we in Canada allow how ridiculous these so-called debates are in Parliament, is, again, you got to ask yourselves, people, do democratic nations work without education of what is related to the real world and has very, very little to do with economics or politics? And also, there has to be accountability, and it must be enforced. Like, let's say the wife of Trump, when he's, 2 steps away from being in jail, leaves him and says, yeah, I never agreed and I felt pressured and yes, I was aware of this. And let's say you give her a pass. Again, she should go to jail for pretty much as long as Trump does, if not longer. And so should his kids and many other politicians. If you don't do this, other countries that are literally worse than you in the savagery of how they treat their own citizens should still feel justified for feeling superior than you. If you really don't punish people in politics that act like this, like for me, when I heard the report for Trump, is, this qualifies as treason. And there has been death penalties of people that really are still not guilty, but the momentum of the justice system still in the USA creates some death penalties that still happen right now. But the overwhelming evidence, because this is so public, is if you want to be strong as a nation again, the USA, is you must give Trump a treason and a death penalty. And then it sends the message to the other countries to stop feeling justified that they're superior than you, the ones that are not really democratic or don't claim to be, but sometimes operate. Like China operates with some democracy. There's a lot of voting of things in there, in case you didn't know. And they do it in a way, although they are also very uneducated about the long-term effects of their choices, is they still make more progress. They argue among themselves less. And in part, it's because they haven't devolved in politics towards ego or self-centered, self-serving ideologies and personality types as in the United States and even in Canada. So in a way, they might not be considered a democracy or claim to be, but the concepts of democracy they may be using as well as North American countries. So think about this, people. Think about the consequences of the actions of politicians, including there should be consequences for politicians that are measured by special committees as not being available for discussions and problem-solving debates with their constituents.